150 years ago, their great-great-great-great-grandparents would have said that, what does it have to do with agriculture? It gets in the way.
This week, we're going to talk about a big idea. Big as in heady and important, but also big as in spacious, vast. It all centers around a fascinating thing I got to learn about this week called prairie, and the reasons we need to think about it more when we talk about agriculture in Iowa. I'm Beth Hoffman, author, journalist, and farmer, and you're listening to At the Iowa Farm Table, a production of the Iowa Food System Coalition, a group of more than 50 organizations in Iowa working to make the food system more just, equitable, and sustainable. I've got to be honest, before I moved to Iowa, I'm not sure I ever thought about prairie. There were grassy places that I probably knew, but there's no chance I could have told you why they were important, critical even, and not only for Iowa, but also for the world. Nicholas Lirio is passionate about prairie.
I'm Nicholas Lirio, director of Hocksey Native Seeds and co-host of the Prairie Farm podcast.
Nicholas's dad, Carol Hoxbergen, first started out in the 1980s learning about prairie. His main interest at the time was just to keep the farm afloat during the farm crisis.
Well, he started growing prairie grass in the 80s, just trying to find any way to survive with the farm, and started to realize that the way we do farming is not sustainable.
But then he decided to grow prairie seeds commercially.
And so he really dove all in early 90s on the prairie thing, and then started adding wildflowers one at a time. The idea is that we have the seed available for reconstructive prairies, because prairie went from 80% of Iowa's landscape to the original remnant prairies down to less than 0.01%.
There's not much prairie left in Iowa.
I think it is really important to start with the why for prairie, because the why of prairie is to the benefit of society, the benefit of all of us.
Prairie helps filter water. It provides habitat. It reduces the runoff of chemicals. It builds organic matter in the soil. In other words, it's prairie that makes Iowa what it is, a place with some of the best soil in the world. And prairie can protect us from what Iowa is becoming, a place with unhealthy soil eroding into the Gulf of Mexico. What does prairie have to do with agriculture in Iowa?
It depends on who you ask. People who are farming conventionally would probably say not much. And 150 years ago, their great-great-great-great-grandparents would have said that, what does it have to do with agriculture? It gets in the way of agriculture. Now that we've had a little more scientific data, we know that we have our very deep, rich topsoil in large part due to prairies. What that means today is that in order to have sustainable practices in Iowa, to keep the deep black soil that we love and have many of us have made a living off of, we need prairie.
But then there is the issue of money. Prairie is a permanent thing. The plants are perennial, not cover crops you can put on a field in an off-season. By contrast, most farming needs a product to sell, a crop. And so for farmers who rely on the land to make money, prairie can be a tough sell.
There's been a lot of studies done on how to use perennials to grow food, and it's difficult. Today, probably the best way to do that is to have the land grazed by a grazer. So for your meat, there is a lot of opportunity to have native prairie, but also just with your soil and water quality and your natural resources, prairie is not only a creator, but a protector of our natural resources here in Iowa. And as that diminishes, so does our soil and our water quality. And I would argue that prairie is an absolute essential part of a healthy agricultural ecosystem.
In 1985, in the middle of the farm crisis here in Iowa, the U.S. Department of Agriculture instituted a program known as the Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP. The program pays farmers to set aside biologically sensitive areas for contracts that last from 10 to 15 years. Iowa has received more than $3 billion in CRP payments since 2017, almost 3 times more than any other state.
So CRP is a conservation reserve program set up by the federal government. Very, very important program. And the idea is that a farmer, let's say a farmer has 500 acres and they have 45 that are less productive, highly erodible. They can actually apply to have prairie planted there.
You can do other things too, like build wetland, restore pollinator habitat, or build riparian buffers along creeks. But you also hear CRP questioned, maybe on social media, for example. People grumbling that taxpayers are wasting money paying farmers not to farm.
From their point of view, they don't understand why the government is paying farmers to not farm their land. And that is a really dangerous wording. One of the greatest biodiverse ecosystems in the world was, and I have to emphasize was, prairie. And so now we have an opportunity in the United States to put high diversity and prairie back on our landscape, and that helps the whole population. To have prairie deemed as wasteful is like deeming the Amazon River wasteful for Brazil.
The EQIP program is also a government grant that helps farmers plant prairie. The one-time payments cost share projects like prairie restoration or putting in ponds.
And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, why did I as a taxpayer pay for that person to get a nice pond? No. You paid for the water that infiltrates from all those fields with all those nitrates to sit in that pond so that the sediment and the nutrients can settle and then enter back into the water cycle. You paid for waterfowl to find a place to land as they're migrating so that we can continue to have wonderful waterfowl. You paid for native species to be along that pond so that monarchs have a place to hang out and lay their eggs.
The Farm Bill, just voted on by the House of Representatives, preserved most of CRP while cutting EQIP by $1 billion over the next 4 years. But perhaps the most significant change during the Trump administration thus far are the personnel cuts that happened at USDA. The department lost more than 24,000 employees in 2025. And that was before the department ordered the relocation of many offices, often to different states.
I had a very specific question about a prairie that we're helping put in. I knew one person that deals with that kind of odd situation. They were one of these government employees, and I called them, and they had amazing answers. I mean, there's probably 10 people that could give the answers and have the knowledge and the education that this person was giving me. And we talked afterwards. They were worried about their job. I'm worried about their job. Yes, as a friend and a person, I don't want them to lose their job, but I'm worried about the education loss we're going to have, the knowledge loss we're going to have. And then let's say in 40 years, we wake up and say, whoa, that was a crazy mistake. The amount of knowledge lost. My word, what are we doing? Where at a federal level, we have decided, you know what doesn't matter very much? The health of our landscape. That doesn't matter very much. What are we thinking? I know we love talking about efficiency, but efficiency got us to a state filled with corn. There's something to be said about doing things more efficiently to help human life, but you can go way too far on it. And we have.
To Nicholas's point, I look out my window here in rural Iowa and see corn and soybean fields. There are some trees and perhaps a creek or two in the distance, but there's no prairie to speak of. And yet, I feel comforted by the fact that there are people like Nicholas in the world, a person in his late 20s who learned from his father how to be a real steward of the land. His father, Carol Hocksbergen, passed away in July of 2025.
I asked my dad once, I said, if Iowa could go back to a healthy balance of agriculture and prairie, but you had to give up your farm and your company, would you? And he said yes. And honestly, I was a little shocked. You know, people don't say that, and my dad and lots of other people in the prairie industry have done this as well. He has given tens of thousands, maybe more, of dollars to the education and furthering of, for lack of a better term, the prairie agenda. This idea that we can pull from the landscape and we can give back to the landscape.
I want to end the show with one last clip from my discussion with Nicholas Lirio. When you wonder what to do about government cuts to things you care about, when you feel hopeless to make change, don't forget that change starts small.
It's really easy to blame people at the top. I do it all the time. Love to sit around, drink coffee, and blame people at the top. But in a lot of ways, they represent me. And what I mean by that is not that I voted for every single person that got in, believe me, but as a state and a community and a civilization, we're not talking about the right things. And I, who have dedicated my life, most of the hours of my life, since graduating college to helping conservation and furthering that, I sit around the table with my friends and I'm nervous to bring up conservation things because I don't want to be weird. I want to get along with them. I want to talk about the corn price like it's normal. Like, yeah, we should be upset that the corn price is so low and that, I want to talk about those things because I want to get along, and I totally understand that. But I can get along with people all the way on the road to hell. And if we don't change our tune and we don't start talking about what's important, that's where we're headed.
A very special thanks this week to Nicholas Lirio for teaching me all about prairie. You've been listening to At the Iowa Farm Table, a production of the Iowa Food System Coalition. You can find more information about the coalition and even join on our website. Please share this podcast. It's a great icebreaker to talk about things that you care about with other people. I'm Beth Hoffman, and thanks so much for listening.